Oh, shame is a prison as cruel as a grave. Shame is a robber, and he's come to take my name. Oh, love is my redeemer, lifting me up from the ground. Love is the power where my freedom song is found. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. When I hear that trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise up out of the ground. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. Oh, fear. Oh, fear is a liar with a smooth and velvet tongue. And fear is a tyrant, he's always telling me to run. Oh, love is resurrection, and love is a trumpet sound. Love is my weapon, I'm gonna take my giants down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. No, 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 no. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. Oh, and when I hear that trumpet sound, when I hear that trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise up out of the ground. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. Yeah. Oh, there was a battle, a war between death and life, and there on a tree the Lamb of God was crucified, and he went on down to hell. He took back every key. He rose up as a lion, and he's setting all the captives free. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. No, 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 no. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. Oh, and when he heard that trumpet sound, when he heard that trumpet sound, he rose up out of the ground. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. There ain't no grave could hold his body down. There ain't no grave, no, could hold my body down. There ain't no grave, no, could hold my body down. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. Yeah. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. Yeah. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. If you walked out of the grave, I'm walking too. Yeah. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. I'm following Jesus. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. Yeah. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. I'm following Jesus. If you walked out of the grave, I'ma walk into. Yeah. If you walked out of the grave, 'cause there ain't no grave. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. Oh, and when I hear that trumpet sound, when I hear that trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise up out of the ground. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave, no, gonna hold my body down.
Please be seated. So that'll be an earworm, I hope, for most of us today. I have in my life been out looking at various types of mixed vegetables in the grocery store and singing, "If you walked out of the grave, I'm a-walking too." It's just a little witness I like to give. Love that song. Got the picture up, got a picture of Jesus on his way to Golgotha. I would like you to stare at that picture and drink it in while I read to you Isaiah 53. This would be the vision that Isaiah received long before the Christ. Who has believed what he has heard from us, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before God like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, and yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. And they made his grave with the wicked, and with a rich man in his death, although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth. May the Lord add blessing to the reading of Scripture this morning. We're going to leave the picture up there for just a little while. It's a disturbing picture. Oh, there it is. It is a disturbing picture. It goes along with lots of modern cinematography where they tell the passion of the Christ in very detailed and graphic ways. You are likely similar to me in your understanding of what the picture represents. So I was raised in church hearing the basic formula of Christianity as it regards the suffering of the Christ, and it went something like this. Jesus loves you so much that he was willing to suffer every indignity and pain and shame and sorrow that a human being could possibly suffer. He took all of the pain of the world on himself and died because of it. And then to display the power of God and the chance at a new life, he rose up from the grave and he was changed while he had been in the grave. Translation to me when I was a little kid or a young man, the same shame that I felt at home and at other places, you better grow up quick or you better get over that or whatever it might have been. When I went to church and saw the picture of Jesus and heard the preacher talk about Christianity, I understood he died because I am a shameful, horrible sinner, and if it weren't for Jesus, I would have gotten my just due for that. Just say amen if that's pretty close to what you've learned. Yeah, that's good Christian teaching. It's harsh and it's hard to hear, but it's true. Now I'm going to contrast that just a little bit with what I have come to realize in pursuit of Christ in my life and in pursuit of the Christian faith all of my life. And what I have learned is, in its own way, even more deeply disturbing than the first part of Jesus bearing the sorrows and the pain of the whole world. Here's what I've learned in simplest words. When I see Jesus on the cross, beaten down and humiliated in that way, it is a picture of the love of God, but it is a very specific picture of the love of God. It is the picture of the love of God bearing not the general sins of the whole population. It is a picture of the heart and the soul of the people who put him on the cross or who deny him still. In other words, we're seeing a picture of Jesus, but Jesus is reflecting to us our own heart and soul. That's what an untreated, non-graced heart and soul looked like. Bloody, angry, hateful, murderous. Those are the ways that human beings become inside. To me, anyway, it is deeply disturbing to realize that that's not just a picture of the Son of God dying for me. It's a picture of what I would have done to the Son of God probably had I been there, and what my soul and heart are like when I don't choose to have the courage to let God cleanse it. It's different, isn't it? A little bit nuanced, but it is different to recognize yourself there. The picture of the suffering Christ is a picture of what we visit on him in a spiritual way, and even worse, it is a picture of what we lay onto other people when we operate in our life out of the wisdom of the world instead of out of the wisdom of God. When we make the decision in our lives to fix the things that are wrong by harming another person, by going after them, giving them compensation for what they've done, right? When we get back to them, when we show them a thing or two about how it is, when we punish them and let the full fury that resides in most human beings, at least for a while, out on another human being, we are painting yet another portrait of what we look like when we abide by those rules. The world will always tell you these lies, that what's wrong with your life is the fault of someone else or many other people, and therefore the way to fix your life is to go after them with a vengeance, to hurt them so badly they would never want to hurt you again. The world will tell you that if we could just come to absolute fairness where everybody had been paid back for all the things that they do, somehow miraculously, Even though we would have to mount immense hatred in our hearts to do that to other people, the world will finally be right and justice will be served. Those are absurd untruths, and they poison the human heart. The wisdom of the world that says, I can hurt you so bad you'll never want to hurt another person, is absolutely false. I don't even have to prove it to you. You already know it. Everybody in this room, on some level, whether physical or emotional, has paid someone back for what they have had done to them. Two troubles: we never stop at fair, and we enjoy it too much. The third trouble: it unleashes in the person that we have set straight by our power and authority the same anger and hatefulness towards us. If they can't take it out on us, they'll take it out on other people. It's interesting to me because I lived so long in my life with what I begin to identify as the John Wayne or Clint Eastwood version of Hollywood justice, just thinking if I could just make people sorry that they had messed with me, that somehow my life would be better. The end result of years of doing that was that I was surrounded by people who did not trust me or like me and who waited for an opportunity to harm me. And I'm not unusual. If you practice the wisdom of the world will see to your end, and you will look, and the people around you that you love will look like the picture. Let's take that thing down, shall we? So today is the second in the series on forgiving. And today we're going to talk about naming the hurt or measuring the pain, whichever phrase kind of sticks with you. But let's first quickly review step one in forgiving other people. In making the decision to pursue forgiveness instead of vengeance, right, you've made the fundamental correct decision in accordance with God's will. When you say to yourself, wow, this thing has happened to me, and right, it really hurt me and harmed me, and what I need to do is I need to be free from the influence of the people or the person who did this, so I'm going to seek to forgive them. I'm going to pour my energy and my passion into that path. You're already halfway home because you haven't bought into the lie and you're not pursuing things that will only make it worse for you and for everybody around you. And in that first step, what we have learned over a lot of time, we being a whole lot of people who study forgiveness and practice it, is that it's necessary to tell someone else, even if it's God or another human being that you can trust, the exact nature of what happened, right? You have to tell the story. You have to lay it out in its horrible detail to someone who will listen without judgment and simply receive it, because you literally have to throw it up. You have to get it out of you. In that process, the hard work is not necessarily relating the tale. We all do that. Well, the hard work in step one is we want you to write the story and write the story and write the story until the story becomes what it truly is, which is, this is the story of the time when a person who had obviously been harmed in their own life chose to deal with that harm by harming me. So it might be very specific. I was lied to by a person who has been lied to many times and thinks that's the way the world operates, and it hurt me when they lied. When you get to that point, you have effectively accomplished truly what revenge tells you you can accomplish falsely. You haven't necessarily equalized, but you have made it fair. Because in the judgment of others, even those who harm us, we have to recognize that they're human beings, even if what they do is egregious, and it often is, and something you would never do. The pattern of behavior is the same for all human beings. Having been hurt, they stumbled around and didn't know what to do with it, and so they bleeded off a little bit at a time by sharing the hurt with other people, by harming them, by doing the same thing that was done to them. So in the first step, you're not asked to forgive. You're simply asked to use the power that God gave you to reason through the story until you can see, not that everything's all equal, but that a human being or many human beings are the people who have harmed you. Whether we're talking molestation, rape, physical abuse, or emotional torment, manipulation, lying, cheating in business, it's all the same. Hurt people, hurt people. When you can get to that specificity in your situation, you have made one giant leap away from the great danger of seeking revenge. Step 2 then, now that the story is told and it's told with a broader perspective than is comfortable for us, a person who has been harmed has harmed me. Step 2 is to ask the fundamental question, well, how bad was it? Here's the thing. In Julesburg, this is a goofy little story, but it illustrates it pretty well. In Julesburg, where I was the Methodist pastor, a town of 700, so most everybody knew who I was, I happened to look out the bathroom window one time, which looked on the side yard, and saw my neighbor bringing his 2 dogs over to use the bathroom in my yard, and then he walked back to his yard, which solved a great mystery since we didn't have dogs. I had lots of choices between me, didn't I? I knew that I couldn't use the Wyoming method of evening the score because that would lead to an arrest. So what I did was I went downstairs and I painted several signs that said, curb your dog, right? Be a decent neighbor. I don't remember all of that I made. And then I put them in his yard and in my yard and waited for the justice to roll down like water from heaven. He called and said, little bit of news for you, my dog can't read. Which put me in a place that was horrifying. So I won't tell the rest of the story, but you can bet we upped it over and over and over, and both went about the business of trying to harm the other for the original harm until effectively they almost had a city council meeting to settle us down. I know when I tell you that revenge is ineffective from long, bitter experience. Not all of my stories have a laugh line in them. When somebody brought their dog to go to the bathroom in my yard, it wasn't the end of the world. And I'll tell you straight, it wasn't even close to the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But my God, I was flooded, right? I felt like my head was going to explode. I couldn't stand it anymore. I staggered around, having to figure out a way to rectify this situation. I was triggered. That's the term that's currently in use. Triggered. Not by the behavior of the neighbor, but by a whole lifetime of choosing not to forgive anybody for anything, so that I had zero tolerance for anything that I read as disrespect. Zero tolerance. To the point where I was willing to make a public war in a tiny little town against a neighbor who, as far as I know, was actually a sweet man except for his dog habits. I was set into motion in those ways that are now so embarrassing to me, not because of the incident that happened. I should have been able to handle that. But having chosen to handle everything that happened before that in the way of the world, not in the way of Christ, I had no tolerance left, and I was just a bomb waiting to explode, and he lit the fuse. Can you hear what I'm saying? So the first step in step 2 is to know it may be that the way you feel about what has happened to you is way out of line with what has happened to you. And if it's an immediate response and it just floods you, right? For me, I see white and I lose all ability to reason when those things have happened to me. That's a sign to you, right, that you are overblowing that incident. And the healthiest thing that you can do is not try to react according to your feelings, but to back off enough to do step 1, and then in step 2, to reason with yourself and with God until it becomes reasonable. What happened to me on the day my neighbor let his dog poop in my yard? I went out and cleaned up some dog poop. And I could have just spoken to him, and I'm quite sure he would have been embarrassed and stopped his behavior. That's all that happened. It didn't merit painting signs, talking trash about him, which I assuredly did, and just having a little meltdown like the whole of the world had ended. Who knew, right? They guess how the world's going to end. It may end with a neighbor that lets his dog poop on your yard. Depends on how many Steves there are out there. All that happened was a man, fairly old, brought his dog into my yard. That's it. But it felt like every insult, every terrible thing, every loss that I'd ever suffered came to bear on it. That's insanity. And it's insanity that is bred by continually swallowing the truth of a world that knows only vengeance as remedy. In step 2, when you name the hurt or measure the hurt. You're looking for a realistic way to react to whatever the situation is, so that in step 3, when we get there, you're able to actually forgive what happened. I would never be able to forgive the enormity of how I felt on that day, because I felt everything that had happened in my lifetime. But I'm perfectly able, having had God restored my sanity, to forgive him for what he did, and I have been able to forgive myself for my reaction. When I limit it to what actually happened, it's much easier to deal with. When I'm flooded and triggered and I am holding whoever is in front of me accountable for everything that ever happened, I'm in an impossible situation, and forgiveness is not possible then. I don't know what level of sainthood you'd have to reach to forgive through one person all that had ever happened to you, but it's beyond my grasp. However, I have learned, I'm able to forgive the incident when I think about it. Now, there are things that are much more serious. If you are physically violated in any way by another human being, then it's not just a simple matter of, oh, that's all that happened. The truth is, in step 2, sometimes the hurt is quite large. So if you have been raped or molested or even beaten up, mugged by somebody, those kind of violations where they get into your body, that's one of the worst things that can happen to a human being. And when you do step 2 in a situation like that, here's what that looks like. You have to say, well, they violated my physical body and they harmed my feeling of well-being, whether it's in your home or wherever the things might have happened. In addition, what they have done has unleashed in you a reticence to trust in the way that we should be allowed to trust. And that's true. That's the damage those kind of things do, right? It can also be in the emotional realm. If somebody manipulates you or lies to you or cheats you in business, they limit your willingness and ability to trust the next time you're in a situation with a different person. So the hurt expands a little bit, but it still isn't universal. And when you can internally look at what has transpired and see those things, you've taken another step into the power of grace and resurrection in your life, because in being able to say, wow, right, I know that this thing has caused me to want to shut down and not be in public and not want to do whatever, you're already looking at the things that God is going to help you grow through so that you can remove the offense that the person has visited on you. That is so much healthier than not recognizing it and having it explode later in your life on another person. So when we name the hurt, we just try really hard to be realistic about the amount of damage done and what that damage is, and that helps us understand what it is that we have to forgive. Keep in mind, in this whole process, which lines out on paper really well, doesn't it? It sounds like forgiveness is easy. The other person may be absolutely at war with you. They may be doubling down and agitating and trying hard to unnerve you again and get you upset and do whatever. That's human nature, right? If they're playing by the rules of the world, you're not done just because inside you're seeking peace, because they're not done. But when you earnestly apply yourself to these tasks, to these steps or stages of forgiveness, what you will find is, bit by bit, the power that someone who has sworn vengeance on you or who makes you their target begins to dissipate, and it becomes what it should be: background noise as you pursue Christ and the freedom that he offers you. It severely limits the power of the bully when you are doing the steps of forgiveness. We think just the opposite, right? We think, well, if I'm too soft and I forgive too easily or too quickly, that'll encourage the bullies and they'll come after me. It isn't spiritually or emotionally what actually transpires. We hold sway and power over one another by repetition of evil against one another and by the threat that there will be more. Human beings tend to be bullies when they buy into the worldview of how to set things straight. Christians have an escape hatch from that, and that escape hatch is to limit the effectiveness of their bullying or their threats or worrying about what they might do by simply choosing to be free in the way that Christ has granted us. I talk every week in the forgiveness series about the same thing. It doesn't sound like it because you don't have John Wayne shooting somebody out of the saddle, or Arnold Schwarzenegger going to set the world right. It's not a big muscled up testosterone bunch of nonsense. It is way more powerful than that. To be able to hold your peace and to have peace when someone makes war on you is the type of power that God desires for all of his followers, because it dismisses evil, and that is the lot of evil. And you can't get it, as far as I know, any other way than by choosing to pour yourself diligently into the task of the 4 steps of forgiveness. Once you're on that path, those that have harmed you, they truly begin to lose their power. And once they begin to lose their power, you come to what I can only call sanity in your own emotional and spiritual life, and things just begin to beautifully explode in front of you that you have not experienced and you probably haven't even considered in your life. Like looking at Christ and knowing that's a picture of my soul at times in my life. It's not just a picture of a guy a long time ago. So it can go both ways. We can overblow what has happened to us, right? We can say, oh my God, that person lied to me, so I'll never ever be able to trust anybody again. Here's where you're going to hear that in the modern world. Did you know there were some ministers who were all about money and sex? They build big churches and they have demons inside that they're not dealing with, and they do despicable, horrible things. They harm their congregation, they harm the people that they're in league with. You know that, yes? Please don't think I don't know it. The wisdom of the world says, wow, there are bad pastors? Then the church is all false. The Bible has no truth in it, and I'm never going to even think about worshiping God because there was one person who didn't do it perfectly. The world is an absurd, evil, wicked blackness, and it lies every time it gets a chance. If there are wicked pastors who are so lost that they're visiting harm on people in a wide variety of ways, the answer to that is not to say there can't be a God. The answer to that in most of our situations is to say, wow, I'm going to pray that that person comes back to God, because obviously there is distance between them and God. We get absurd in our pronouncements and in our actions and reactions when we try to live by the brutal justice of the world. Absurd to the point where we throw the baby out with the bath water. The same thing, car salesmen, you name it, physicians, in any profession, there's going to be people who are really terrible and do bad things, but it doesn't mean the whole profession is wrong or anybody in the profession is wrong. It means that in step 2 of forgiveness, that you have been dealt wrong by a person, if it happened to you personally, or you are aware that a person has stumbled. And that's what it means. It doesn't call into question the truth of the existence of God. It doesn't mean that every church is corrupt. It doesn't mean that you better watch really carefully to see what's going on everywhere, or run around telling Christians that they're out of their minds because there was a bad pastor once, or even 10,000 bad pastors. Can you hear the absurdity of it when we talk about it on a Sunday morning? And we're not talking about a specific situation. That is the lot of those who say, I'm going to take care of this matter myself, and as soon as I fix it and make it equal, and I hurt all the bad people and I harm them and I teach them a lesson so they'll never do it again, that world results in the picture that we saw before, and it results in that picture being visited on all kinds of people, many of whom could be helped with a little bit of grace. We name the hurt. We measure what's really happened here. In this stage of my life, and Lord knows I expect to live to be like 180 if you have to live until you're all straightened out. In this stage of my life, I'm becoming aware I still get triggered sometimes, right? Somebody says or does something or whatever, and I feel that old blush and that kind of rush or whatever. I have stumbled upon this. It's true for me. I hope it would be true for you too. I've done step 2 often enough to begin to realize, oh, the big deal isn't what was done in this incident. The big deal is I fooled myself a little bit, and I'm not as healed as I thought I was, because if I can be triggered, that means I have forgiveness still to give to things that have happened in the past. And when I'm sane, I return and ask myself, well, who flitted through my mind when that person did that? And that tells me I've just got work to do. Listen to what I'm describing to you. when triggered, it can cause you to act egregiously toward other people, or it can remind you, yeah, I made some steps in forgiving that or that person or those incidents, but I obviously still have more work to do, and it can give you something positive to put yourself into so that you are not as easily triggered as you go along. Let me put that to you in another way, so that you're freer from the influence of the wisdom of the world and you are free in the wisdom of Christ. The matters of forgiveness are a big deal, and they are easy to shortchange yourself and say, you know what, I've been practicing being mad for a very long time, and I'm pretty good at revenge. Maybe you think, Creel doesn't know what he's doing on revenge. Well, I didn't get a black belt in it, but I was in school. All of us have likely lived long enough to know it's just a zero-sum game when we decide the response to wickedness on behalf of other people towards us is to out-wicked them. It's insane. God has given us, through Christ, through his teachings and through his example, a path in which, in spite of the efforts of other people who want to bring us to their level, we can be free and radically independent, and you can even have joy when somebody's making it their business to rob you of joy. That's only really possible through the mechanism of forgiveness. You receive the power of the forgiveness of God as you try to exert that power by forgiving other people. A big part of the process is to be sane about what you're dealing with and read it correctly so that you have something that is manageable for you to be able to forgive. Here's a strange truth. Again, I share with you things that mystify me and will, I suppose, all of my life. The people who I feel closest to in my life now are the people I have done the deepest work of forgiveness on. That's crazy, isn't it? I've shared with you my background as a child, and having worked forgiveness in those areas, really, I mean diligently, just poured myself into it because it's so much better use of energy than seething. I find that in a strange way, doing that work causes me to treasure the good that I refuse to see in the people that I've had to forgive the most, to the point where I have a heart for them that is almost impossible for me to believe. We talk in these things about what is for me, and I think for everybody, right? The very nature of life itself. To be able to look back at people who have harmed me and to see them in their pain and their struggle, and to remember not just the things they've done to me, but to remember they were a human being who had great qualities. Sometimes they were just so locked up that they didn't get out very often, and sometimes they were in equal measure to the wickedness, is a beautiful gift. Am I not describing now exactly how you hope Christ will see you in judgment? That as you stand there and the picture shows up of what you've done to other people and how it's looked inside of you, don't you really hope that the Christ will be the one in all of your life who remembers not the stripes you laid on him and that you had on yourself, but the times when you grew and you became grace in people's life and you forgave and you encouraged other people to forgive? Don't you hope that on the other screen, as your sins show up on one side, your grace and your love and your genuineness and your assistance and your deep abiding love of other people shows up to show the true picture of who you are? When you make the decision whether or not to do these 4 steps of forgiveness, to really apply yourself and become excellent at them, you're making a decision about the quality of your life. As you go, not on some fine day, you can have freedom, you can have joy restored, and you can even learn to have profound respect for those that have harmed you. It is crazy powerful. Crazy powerful. Sometimes I forget that I believe it my own self. And then I remember. The gospel story is that the hatefulness of people who were guarding their positions and who were living in darkness, That hatefulness got visited on an innocent who did nothing to merit it. And the story is they won. They defeated him utterly. They whipped and they stripped and they mocked and they shamed and they beat and they stabbed and they made him die. And he was not a problem for them anymore. That part of the story I'm quite familiar with. When I feel a little out of touch with the gospel and grace, I remember that's just a stage in the story, because the next step is, it turned out the only thing they could do was injure his body. The power of God resurrected him. And here's the strangest thing of all. Really, it's our story, right? When he was resurrected, he still had the marks. They were on his hands and his feet, right? Thomas wanted to be able to touch them. But the one who was so hideous that we can barely stand to look at him in his resurrected form was so beautiful that people were drawn to him every time he went anywhere in that resurrected form. They couldn't stay away from him anymore. The very things that had made him so hideous in resurrection made him beautiful. Last thing for today. If you're having trouble finding motivation to revisit and dig up some of the stuff that you've kind of plastered down in your life, think about your children and your grandchildren, people that you're mentoring, the next generation, whatever that is for you. And remember that for the rest of their life, they will have a picture of you that they carry in their memory. It will either be of some savage beast who insisted on justice and taught them a lesson or two and whatever. Or it will be of the one person in their life who, no matter how much they had messed up, loved them and saw the best in them. Man, that would be a nice legacy, wouldn't it? It's only possible for you to give that legacy and that hope and that inspiration to another person if you're willing to do the work that God has set before us. Very last thing. The same God who calls us to do this very hard work gives us the power to complete it. Don't have to do it on your own. Once you show yourself willing to enter into the process and you ask for God to help, He will help you in abundance. Next week, we'll talk about the center of the faith, which is forgiveness. It's a horrible, terrible, wonderful, great, crazy thing. I'll talk to you then.